Brute Horse Beef, coming at you again. Holy fuck, I don't know what that intro was. But today, I'm bringing you a tier list. First tier list in a little while. And today I wanted to cover exactly how I feel that past and present UFC fighters would have fared in Pride FC. And believe me, it is a big difference, Pride to UFC. Pride was a lot more akin to just an all-out street fight. Very little going in the way of an actual rule set, but ironically, the way that rules were enforced was, I would actually say, better than the way that the UFC enforces their rules, even if the rule set was limited, right? But for me, Pride, it just represents the true golden age of MMA. I know we have bigger stars nowadays, right? Bigger pay-per-views, but Pride truly represented the most violent era of MMA. So I wanted to represent that and really talk about how each of these fighters would hypothetically do in Pride. Now, of course, I believe the lightest weight class in Pride was about 160 pounds, I think was like the smallest weight limit. So a lot of these guys would have to blow themselves up quite large, which a lot of fighters would do, right? You would see in Pride fighters who looked like about 2-3 weight classes smaller than their opponents and still go out there and beat them. So that's what I wanted to talk about here. Of course, it's very hypothetical. You know, some of these fighters just wouldn't even be able to fight, but just considering this is a hypothetical discussion, just suspend disbelief just a little bit for the sake of this tier list. So let's just get into them right now. And first, I want to talk about the current bantamweight champion, Sean O'Malley. Now, I think he could do pretty well in Pride, right? You need to consider that the first round in Pride was a 10-minute round followed by a 5-minute second round, and then for title fights is a 10-minute round followed by 2-5. So I think within that first 10-minute round, Sean O'Malley would have a lot of time to work and find his shots. Yeah, I don't know, but also it could work against him. A 10-minute round is quite ridiculous, honestly. I don't know. I think Sean O'Malley would do quite well, but I'm just gonna put him right in the middle there, B tier. Sean Strickland, yeah, I don't know. The guy's a decision fighter. Yeah, if you give him a 10-minute round, he might be able to land many jabs on you, but I don't think that he would do very well in Pride rules, to be honest. Aljamain Sterling, this category was pretty much made for him, and there's no one more deserving of being put in that category than Aljamain Sterling. I mean, all of his weird tactics that pretty much just take advantage of UFC's rule set that protects grapplers would be completely destroyed, right? And he would, as this category states, would have his head soccer kicked and stomped into oblivion. And I just don't think that Aljamain Sterling, who's gotten by with the advantage of UFC rules, you know, he would not do nearly as well in Pride. I don't think he would get anywhere near a title, and he would probably get soccer kicked into retirement, in all honesty. Alex Pereira, now this is a very tough one because I think he would do extremely well in Pride. I really do. Part of me wants to say he'd be champion, and I think he possibly could be when you consider some of the opponents he would have had to fight, right? If he was a 205er, he probably would have gone against guys like Shogun Rua, Ricardo Arona, Alistair Overeem. Do you think he could do well against those guys? I think he would. So for me, Alex Pereira, especially like a prime Alex Pereira, I think in Pride he could very well be a champion. Alexander Pantoja, now this is where it comes into the suspension of disbelief because he's a flyweight and he would have probably never been able to fight in Pride unless he was going up against men much bigger than him. So for me, I almost want to say that he would get soccer kicked into retirement, but the man is a hard-nosed brawler, right? Unlike Aljamain Sterling, so he has that toughness about him, he has that grit. So I'll say that he wouldn't quite get soccer kicked into retirement, but he wouldn't also get that far, in my personal opinion. Charles Oliveira, man, super well-rounded. He would have probably had to fight at about 160, so would have been competing with guys like Nick Diaz, Takanori Gomi, and I think he would have done quite well. So I'm going to put him at A tier. Well-rounded fighter, and I don't think that the rule set differences, a 10-minute first round, would really play much of a factor in his favor or against him, you know? So Charles Oliveira, I think A tier, very, very close to being a champion. Max Holloway, next up, man. I might put him in the same spot. Do I think he could be a champion? Very possibly, because of his cardio and the fact that he is able to throw high volume. Like a 10-minute first round would honestly be a deal breaker for me and Max Holloway. So now, the more I think about it, he would be 100% champion, because he would just put the volume on his opponents and take advantage of his incredible chin, and I believe just overwhelm his opponents in that first round and beat a good amount of those guys. And he has the durability and cardio, chin, I believe, to win like some kind of a Pride Grand Prix if he was able to fight during that time. He is the kind of fighter who would be able to win that Grand Prix. So yeah, 100% man, champion. Yuri Prochazka, the rule set of Pride just being a complete street fight almost does favor Yuri more than any other fighter. I just feel like he would find a way to win, and in that 10-minute first round, I keep referencing it, but it is an important factor. Yuri would be a demon under Pride rules. So in my opinion, he would 100% be a champion. Ilia Topuria, I mean, based off the skill set alone, he could be champion, right? You could easily see him being champion, but then you have to consider that he would have to fight 160 pound guys. I don't know. I'm going to say A tier, right? I do think that just based on the skill set alone, he's so elite. Right? Whenever I talk about Topuria, I never understate how elite this guy is, but I just feel like under Pride rules, 10-minute first round, and his size alone would put him close to becoming a champ, but I don't think he would quite get there, right? I don't think he'd quite get there, but he'd get very close. Volkanovski, maybe somewhere similar to Ilia and Charles Oliveira, maybe a little bit lower, but nah, he's so good. So the same argument has to be applied to Volkanovski, right? The well-rounded elite skill set that he possesses would take him far, and I think he could have competed with a lot of those 160-pound fighters back then. For me personally, Volkanovski 100% A tier. John Bones Jones. Now there's a very important factor to think of here, that in Pride there was a card system, right? So if you were displayed a green card, then you would be deducted 10% of your purse, which is a very interesting rule, which I do like, honestly. That would very well deter fighters from wanting to commit fouls, willingly committing fouls. And we all know that John Jones is the most deliberate fouler in all of MMA and has gotten the furthest while receiving very little repercussions for his fouls. So I believe in Pride, all the eye pokes, right, he would very easily receive 3 yellow cards in many of his fights and be disqualified as a result. So even though he has all the skills in the world, I believe all the cheating would get him into trouble. So for that reason, right, factoring it in, so the skills would put him at champion level. I 100% think so. But then you have to consider the fouls and the card system. That would spell trouble for John Jones in his Pride career. So for that reason, I'm putting him in the middle of the pack. And I think B tier is perfect for John Jones. Peter Yan would 100% be a champion. We've already seen the man enact Pride rules against Aljamain Sterling with that stupid fucking knee that changed the course of history. Oh, god damn it. But yes, 100% Peter Yan would be a champion. He's good at everything. And then he can throw knees on the ground legally. He would be unstoppable. Even though I used the size argument for fighters below him, don't give a shit, man. He's just that good, even if he's fighting 160-pound guys. Imagine like a slightly bulked up Peter Yan. He's beating the brakes off everybody he's going up against and becoming champion, winning every Pride Grand Prix known to man. Peter Yan, 100% would be champion under Pride rules. Colby Covington, you know what? Maybe because of his cardio in that 10-minute first round, he would be able to overwhelm guys. So this does kind of have me rethinking things, but at the same time, with his volume of takedown attempts and the fact that knees and soccer kicks on the ground are allowed, that would spell a lot of danger for grappling heavy fighters. Like guys like Sakuraba would eventually fall massive prey to it. But still, I think because of the cardio, I have to be fair to Colby Covington. He would possibly be able to overwhelm a lot of his opponents in that first round, being 10 minutes. So yeah, for me, Colby Covington would be about C tier, I think. Michael Chandler, you know what, dude? That first 10-minute round would spell danger for him, because I think he would, he has 10 minutes to screw himself over at some point. So for that reason, I think I'll keep him at C tier. I just think he's too dumb and would make a dumb decision at some point to get himself finished within that first 10 minutes. On top of the fact that, yeah, while he's extremely tough, very durable, at times, I don't know, it's kind of inconsistent the way that he shows his durability. He is still a little bit chinny, and his cardio isn't really the greatest. So yeah, Michael Chandler, I think C tier for him is perfectly fair. Conor McGregor, you know what? I almost want to put him down here with Aljamain Sterling because yes, he has 10 minutes at the beginning to find a good shot, but if he doesn't find that shot, he's just going to fade and then get completely overwhelmed. So I think I'll put him in the same spot as Michael Chandler. Eddie Alvarez, he's definitely more built for this type of competition, just like a straight-up street fight that Pride pretty much is. I think he would do very well, although not enough to really be champion or compete up there with guys like Volkanovski, Ilya, or Charles Oliveira. But nonetheless, I think Eddie Alvarez and his grit, his overall style, the dude would have done well in Pride, I believe, and could have even came close to title contention. I just imagine a Pride Grand Prix with Eddie Alvarez, Charles Oliveira, Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje competing against one another. That would have been so much fun. We're just so unlucky that the UFC rule set is what it is, because it holds us back from really witnessing amazing bracket style tournaments that Pride used to bring, and also Glory as well. Man, it sucks. Or sorry, K1, and Glory. Jose Aldo, he would have done very well. I think just skill for skill, the guy would have done so well. He's not a super small guy either. He would have had to compete with bigger guys, you would say. But I think skill for skill, he's up there with guys like Volkanovski and Ilya Topuria and Charles Oliveira. Would he have been able to compete? Yes, probably. But maybe a little undersized. I don't know. I'll put Jose Aldo at B tier, but I'm kind of considering putting him at A. But nah, dude, he kicked so hard. Imagine you shoot a takedown on Jose Aldo, he stuffs it and then starts ripping you with soccer kicks to the top of your head. Nah, Jose Aldo 100% A tier. 100%. He's even pushing would be a champion type levels. Khabib Nurmagomedov. Now I have to admit, you have 10 minutes to fight off takedown attempts from Khabib. Nah. He will 100%, or he would 100% be a champion, right? At 160, he could have even won multiple belts in multiple weight classes. I just think the rule set actually does favor someone like Khabib very much. And even though, yeah, he could catch a soccer kick to the head or a stomp to the face if his takedown defense, or if his takedowns are defended, I just think that if he would have 10 minutes in the first round to work, he would get so many finishes within that first round just by overwhelming his opponents with grappling. That, yeah, Khabib for me, I don't know if I can think of someone who I would less rather fight in Pride with Pride rules with that first minute, or with that first round being 10 minutes. Balal Muhammad, that's a tough one. I feel like this is kind of a tough one to decide. Well, I think he would get soccer kicked quite often, but his cardio is quite great, although he doesn't have the stopping power. But he's better than Colby. Does he deserve to be above Colby? For me, no, he doesn't. So I think C tier is fair for Balal. I don't think he would be a champion. I really don't. Although there is a possibility that he could overwhelm his opponents, right? Similar argument to what I used for Khabib. But he's just not the same type of fighter as Khabib. Yeah. Balal Muhammad, I think C tier. Arguably, he's pushing B tier. You know what? Let me move him up and give respect to Balal Muhammad. The cardio, the pressure in that first 10-minute round would be very difficult for a lot of fighters to deal with. So, you know what? B tier, to be fair, to Balal Muhammad. Deiveson Figueiredo, obviously, he'd have to fight multiple weight classes above what he's been fighting right now. But his skill set is so elite that it's not hard to see him doing well in Pride against bigger men. But to factor that in, I think B tier is where Figgy would fare within Pride rules. Israel Adesanya. Now, this is one where I'm tempted to just stick him down here, but that's just not what I believe, because I do think that he would do very well. A prime Israel Adesanya would do well in Pride. I do think so. I really do think he'd do well in Pride. He's not shooting from any takedowns, so he's not in great danger of being soccer kicked or having his head stomped on. You have 10 minutes in that first round to work and really pick his opponents apart. I think he would do well. I think he would do well. Although I'm sticking him, man, I have to be fair to Izzy, dude. Fuck. No, I don't want to put him there because I love everyone in that A tier, and I just disrupt the entire tier just by putting Izzy there with his fucking gayness. Okay, I'll just stick him there. Fuck it. Yeah, I think he'd do well, man. To be fair to him, I have to be fair. I have to. God damn it. Dustin Poirier. This man, just like I said about Eddie Alvarez, he's built for this shit. A 10-minute first round with Dustin Poirier. You better be ready for about 200 shots being thrown at your head in that 10-minute round, man. This dude, with 10 minutes to work, I think he would break down a lot of guys and get so many knockouts in that first round. I think he would even do better than Charles Oliveira. Can I be biased and put him at the very top and say he'd be champion? Nah, I can't. I just can't do it. But Dustin Poirier, for me, is one of these newer age UFC fighters, at least of this past generation, who would absolutely kill shit in Pride, under Pride rules. Dustin Poirier is the man. Shavkat Rakhmonov. Now, I feel like we haven't seen a whole lot of his cardio be put to the test other than against Jeff Neal, I guess. And he did show that he leaves himself vulnerable and does fade slightly. But even when he's faded, man, Shavkat Rakhmonov still hunts you down for the finish. And having somebody like Shavkat Rakhmonov who's always coming for the finish, and I keep referencing the 10-minute first round, but that's such a factor that you need to really take that into account when you're bringing up these fighters and how they would do in Pride and really theorizing about that. I think Shavkat Rakhmonov with 10 minutes to work on you, when he's the level of finisher that he is. Obviously, we haven't seen him against championship caliber fighters yet in the UFC, so it's hard to say that he'd be a champion. But I just think that skill set and the fact that he's such a ruthless finisher and well-rounded, he would do extremely well in Pride. Same thing goes for Gregory Rodriguez, man. And the argument that I just used for Shavkat Rakhmonov to not put him at champion is because he hasn't fought championship caliber fighters. And I think the same thing goes for Gregory Rodriguez. So I can't put him up there, but he's close. I just feel like the skill set, it would translate very well to Pride rules. Tough as nails, great hands, powerful, and elite grappling. Seriously, Gregory Rodriguez goes under the radar so much when it comes to potential future champions. The man's a fucking animal. He's one of my favorite fighters in the UFC right now. So this may be bias driven, but A tier for Gregory. Tom Aspinall would 100% be a champion. He would have the speed advantage over everyone, absolutely everyone in Pride during that time. But yeah, just imagine like a prime Tom Aspinall that we have right now against a prime Fedor, against a prime Mirko Krokop. That would just be crazy. Although it's something that we can and will never see. But I do think that Tom Aspinall could be a champion. Just considering how easily he's taken his opponents out. He doesn't even need 10 minutes to work on you. He just needs about a minute. So yeah, I think Aspinall would be a champion. Benoit Saint-Denis, I included him here for similar reasons to why I included like Eddie Alvarez and a lot of these lightweights, is because these dudes just love going to war every time. And I do think that Benoit Saint-Denis would be an absolute nightmare to deal with, especially in that first round being 10 minutes, as I keep saying. But we've seen him fade as well, although he had staff, so maybe it's an outlier. But I think middle of the pack for Benoit Saint-Denis. I'd probably have to see him do well against higher level competition first. And then we have another UFC lightweight being Islam Makhachev, and he's just too damn good. I don't think the rule set would make much of a difference for him. If anything, I think it would strengthen his ability to be a champion, because then he's able to knee you and kick you while you're on the ground. And knees to the head from Islam Makhachev on the ground, and get out of here. Islam Makhachev would 100% be champion. Khalil Roundtree, we do know he likes throwing kicks and knees to grounded opponents, so that would play in his favor. Although you have to factor in everything else, right? Is he a championship caliber fighter to begin with? In my opinion, no, he's not, despite being gifted the title shot against Alex Pereira coming up soon. So I would probably put him down here, but because of his affinity for soccer kicks and just brutal techniques on the ground, B tier for Khalil Roundtree. George St. Pierre, same argument with Islam Makhachev. He 100% would have been a champion in Pride. Like I say, the rule set, I'm not too sure would come into much effect against him, just because he was so good and so dominant on the ground. I don't know if he would have allowed himself to be put in a position to where he's receiving repeated soccer kicks to the head and knees to the head. He would have been the one delivering those blows if anything. So GSP would be champion 100%. Robert Whittaker, that's a tough one, I guess. I don't know how much of a difference it would make. I think he's just an elite fighter, so he would still be an elite fighter in Pride. So I'll put Robert Whittaker at A tier. I think it's pretty fair to put him there. Khamzat Chimaev. Now this is a tough one, man. I know there are a lot of Chimaev dick riders out there still for whatever reason. I don't understand the hype around this guy. He's a crypto scammer, and he has no gas tank and really only has 1 round in him. So within that first round being 10 minutes, I think he would have about 5 minutes to work against you at his top level. And then in the second half of those first minute rounds, if he wasn't able to finish his opponents, what happens then? I think he gets steamrolled. I think he gets beaten. So I'm not too sure that Chimaev would have actually done too well in Pride. I think he would have gassed out eventually if he's not able to finish his opponents, just like he's shown in the UFC. It's a tough one, but I'm going to put Chimaev at C tier. I don't think he would do very well personally. Same thing for Leon Edwards. I just think he's too complacent. He really is. He's just too complacent. He's not violent enough. You know, he always tries to be clean and technical, keep it a technical fight. It just doesn't work that way. It just didn't work that way in Pride for the most part. So I think he would not do very well. So I'll put him at C tier. Kron Gracie, I literally included him here just to put him in this category. He would butt scoot and pretty much do everything that Sakuraba tried to do with just far less effectiveness and get his face caved in with soccer kicks and stomps. So no, absolutely not. He would do shitty. Ciryl Gane, I think similar to Tom Aspinall, I think he would do very well in Pride just because of the speed and athleticism that he really had. And if he was able to really put that to use during that particular era of MMA, he would be a really tough puzzle to solve for a lot of fighters during that time period. So Ciryl Gane, I think A tier. He's pushing the boundaries though of would-be champion. Honestly, Kamaru Usman, would he do well? Yes, maybe. Although we have seen him become a little bit complacent on the ground at times. And I would say another fighter who got by at times because of the rule set, I think he'd do well, but not super well. So I'll put him middle of the pack. Kamaru Usman, and I just think his legacy is very overblown, to be honest, man. Like Kamaru Usman, look at his resume. I know this is besides the point, but I'm just saying, look at Kamaru Usman's resume objectively, and it's really just not even that good, to be honest, man. I don't know. I know it's besides the point, but I just wanted to throw that one in there. Justin Gaethje, another fighter who, for me, was just built for this shit. He really was. This type of rule set would benefit Justin Gaethje. The 10-minute first round would be an absolute barn burner every single time with Justin Gaethje. He would either knock you out or get knocked out in the first round, I think, every single time. So for that reason, maybe it's time to put him lower. But nah, man, the dude is just built for all-out combat. So I'm putting him at an A tier. I don't think he'd be a champ, but I think he'd be one of those dudes that the Japanese fans would just adore in Pride. They would adore him. Merab Dvalishvili. Now this is one to consider, man. I don't think he would be champ, but I think same argument for Colby, but to an even greater degree. Imagine the pace that Merab would put on his opponents in that first round. And I know he's relatively small, but I just feel like that Energizer Bunny style that he has would play in his favor. And if he doesn't finish his opponent in that first, imagine after the pace that Merab's able to put on you, getting to that second round, I imagine that majority of his opponents would be huffing and puffing if they don't finish him or he doesn't finish them. So I think A tier for Merab is a fair call. And then we have Arman Tsarukyan. And I think he's good enough, skill for skill, to where the rule set wouldn't make much of a difference. I think he would be on the cusp of title challenge. I think he would even get to like the finals of a Pride Grand Prix before being beaten by somebody like an Islam Makhachev. So for me, Arman Tsarukyan, A tier, makes all the sense in the world. Umar Nurmagomedov, he might even warrant the same placement, just skill for skill, but we've only seen him go 5 rounds with Sandhagen, and he looked great. He really did. He looked sharp. We just haven't seen enough out of him. We haven't seen enough, even though he looked so good. I can't really jump the gun and put him anywhere else. I just feel like there's a good chance that he eats some knees to the head on the ground, shoots, gets a takedown stuffed, and then just gets brutalized. I don't know. I can just see a scenario like that happening to Umar in Pride, but he's just so good, and I think he showed skill for skill that, you know what? I don't know. It might be dishonest to not put him at A tier, but at the same time, we need to factor in size, and yeah, he would definitely be dominated, but just skill for skill, that would allow him to compete against bigger guys, but not enough to put him at A tier for me. Wonderboy Thompson, great cardio, great striker, super sharp. Imagine like bouncing off the ropes and allowing him to angle out pretty effectively as well. I do feel like Wonderboy Thompson would do extremely well in Pride. I really do. Honestly, I'm gonna put him at B tier. I think B tier is a super fair placement for Wonderboy. He's not complacent. I keep saying it, like the 10-minute first round, Wonderboy would have so much time to work, and I think would be able to pick apart opponents quite well with 10 minutes to go. Ian Gary, I think I'll just stick him right at C tier. I just don't see anything special about him nowadays. I really don't. I just really don't. So yeah, he would get beat up. Brian Ortega, I mean, jiu-jitsu is a pretty effective martial art. In Pride, I feel like these days it's kind of losing its effectiveness a bit. Fighters are more capable of dealing with high-level jiu-jitsu, right, and keeping it at bay and nullifying it to an extent. But Brian Ortega, I think, would do quite well with that chin, the durability, and the ability to find the submission. I think he would do well, honestly. So Brian Ortega, I'll put him at B tier. Daniel Cormier, I think he would be on the very cusp of championship. You know what? If we're looking at guys like Fedor, some people even put DC above Fedor. I think DC, all things considered, would be a champion. But then, what did I say about Jones, though? I said he would receive card after card after card, and that's a factor. So that, in turn would be a factor for DC as well. So I think DC would have to get moved down to A tier just by virtue of the fact that he is a notorious eye poker himself. So he would be carded, and there's a good chance that he could be disqualified along his Grand Prix run. So you know what? Daniel Cormier, you got to be at A tier. Glover Teixeira, I'm thinking maybe a similar placement to DC, right? A prime Glover Teixeira, great cardio, power in the hands, great grappling. Not a whole lot of weaknesses to really be said for Glover Teixeira. So I'm going to put him at A tier as well. I think that's pretty fair for him. I think that represents his level very, very well. Ryan Hall, another fighter, just like Kron Gracie. I brought him in here just to say that he would get soccer kicked into oblivion and have his skull caved in with stomps. 100%. Prove me wrong on that one. JDM, I mean, you jiu-jitsu nerds might even try and prove me wrong on that one, but you're just wrong. He would get soccer kicked and stomped. Okay, JDM, sick boxing, tough as nails, genuinely a tough guy. Good scrambler too. I think he would do quite well. I think based on how tough he is, how good his hands are, how good he is at scrambling, getting off the ground, JDM, all things considered, I think you'd do pretty well in Pride. I think he's the type of fighter in the UFC today who is actually built for that type of a rule set, just based on how tough he is, his mentality. I respect all of it. I think JDM would do quite well. And then we have Paddy the Baddy Pimblett. Now, he showed big improvements, I think, against Bobby Green, even though on the feet, yeah, he's just not that good, and he would rely heavily on his grappling. So this isn't in a way to disrespect Paddy Pimblett, because he really impressed me against Bobby Green. But I just still think that because of how poor his stand-up is, how poor his defense is, he would rely on his grappling too much, and I can see him succumbing to Pride rule set as a whole. So yeah, I'm going to stick him at the very bottom tier there, but I would probably put him above everyone else as far as how he would do. Even though I don't think he's as skilled overall as Aljamain Sterling, I still think he's tougher and would do better, despite the fact that I don't think that he would really do very well under that rule set whatsoever. Diego Lopez now fighting tomorrow against Brian Ortega. How would he do? Tough guy, but we saw him fade, although it could be an outlier, as I said in my prediction for his fight against Brian Ortega, but we do have to factor that in. You know what? Does he deserve to be down here? Maybe just because of the way his gas tank looked against Ige. But I don't know. He's also a finisher, dude. He has power in his hands, excellent jiu-jitsu. Nah, I have to be respectful to Diego Lopez. I think he would do quite well with his overall skill set and wouldn't really be affected too much by the different rule set pretty much at all. Francis Ngannou, dude, this man would be an animal. Prime Francis Ngannou in Pride. Although you have to consider this: if he's not able to knock out his opponent in the first few minutes, he then has to stand in front of his opponent, huffing and puffing, with very little pop on his shots for the remainder of that 10-minute first round. So you know what? I think his power would be enough to get him by. But imagine him fighting in a Grand Prix with his cardio. Imagine that. That would take a lot away from him. He would rely on early knockouts, which he could get frequently. But if you're reliant on those and you don't get it, that would spell, I think, major trouble for Francis Ngannou. So A tier for him. Marlon Chito Vera, I think his toughness alone would allow him to survive, and then maybe his game plan would be to grind out the first round, bring it into the second, and then try and pour it on and get a finish. But at the same time, I'm not too sure that he's just good enough, right? He's tough enough, but is he good enough? No, but he's tough enough to do well in Pride, I think, to do well enough. So I think B tier for him is pretty fair. Derek Lewis, similar to Ngannou, but with just much less skill and an even worse gas tank, in all honesty. I think he would throw bombs for the first couple of minutes, gas out, and then get finished pretty much every single time. So I almost want to put him at the very bottom here, but I'll put him at C tier because I still rate his ability to find the knockout regardless. Nate Diaz, man, imagine Nate Diaz and his bro competing in Pride. That would have been a beautiful sight to see. And I do think, man, because like what's the Nate Diaz fan argument all the time, right? A sixth round would guarantee Nate victory pretty much every single time. But how about a 10-minute first round, right? But that's also a lot of time for his opponent to put damage on Nate. So I don't know, man. I think the cardio, the chin, the toughness, and the style, and the well-rounded skill set, because, you know, Nate Diaz, I feel like he has underrated skills when you really come down to it. His overall boxing ability is underrated, and his jiu-jitsu is super high level. So I think B tier is perfect for someone like Nate Diaz. I think his cardio and durability would allow him to get through that first round and really wear in his opponents, and then maybe pour it on in the second and get it done. You never really know, but for me, Nate Diaz at B tier makes sense. Movsar Evloev, I think he would do pretty well. Nothing overly impressive, but I think he would do well. So for me, B tier. Corey Sandhagen, I don't know, he's just too complacent. He's too concerned with having a crisp, technical fight, and it just wouldn't work that way for him, and he would be undersized as well. So to factor that in, I think C tier makes sense for the Sandman, even though I'm such a fan of his. Frankie Edgar, baby. This dude is known for fighting dudes above his size, and he's actually fought guys around the weight class. That is the minimum weight class in Pride, or was the minimum weight class in Pride. So Frankie Edgar, he's used to fighting bigger men, and I think a prime Frankie in Pride, but at the same time, I can see him getting soccer kicked. So when you factor in the soccer kicks, he comes from would-be champion down to A tier, just down to the experience that Frankie has being undersized in fights. Love Frankie Edgar. For me, he would just be on the cusp of being champ. Plus the cardio, right? That 10-minute first round, I keep saying it, would spell big danger for his opponents if you're not able to spark them out. The pace that Frankie would put on you, the volume of takedown attempts, I think he would do well under Pride rules. And then we have my boy, love this dude, Dricus du Plessis, would be champion of anyone fighting currently in the UFC. DDP is the one who I look at and think, yep, you would kill it in Pride. Hard-nosed brawler, well-rounded, crazy style, seemingly unlimited gas tank despite how gassed he seems to always look. Nah, Dricus would kill it in Pride. 100% Pride Grand Prix. Imagine him going against like a prime Vanderlei Silva in like the finals of a Grand Prix. That shit would be so banging. And Dricus would maybe just be good enough to get that one done. For me, Dricus would 100% be a champion, and you will not change my mind on that one because it's just true. And then last but not least, we have this Russian tank, Sergey Pavlovich. I think just about middle of the pack. He's not as good as Francis Ngannou in my opinion, but he's better than Derek Lewis. But seems to have a pretty decent gas tank, right? So he wouldn't be reliant on the early knockouts, but maybe he would chase the early knockouts, gas out, and then get finished at some point. So yeah, I don't know. The skill set, the rule set doesn't really factor in too much for me when it comes to Sergey Pavlovich. But I think about the competition. Like, imagine him versus prime Fedor Emelianenko. God, man, like when I think about these hypothetical matchups between current UFC fighters and past Pride fighters, it just makes the imagination go wild, and it's just such a shame when we're never going to be able to see matchups like that, although that does give me an idea for a future video possibly. So look forward to that coming relatively soon, even though I just came up with it in my brain this current second. Trust me, that this video that I just came up with right now will be a banger in the future. But anyway, aside from that, that was the end of the tier list. Let me know in the comment section below what you guys think about my placement. If you're not too aware of Pride rules, I would encourage you to go look them up. And if you're not just aware of Pride in general, of how violent that era of MMA was, I recommend going and looking up Napoleon Bonaparte's channel, because he has provided, I think, some of the best entertainment when it comes to Pride content. So I would encourage you to go look that stuff up if you would like to educate yourself on Pride, because I am not the best guy to be doing that. It is Napoleon Bonaparte 100%. His videos are incredible. They really, really are some of the best MMA content on YouTube. Much better than mine, I must say. So anyway, guys, I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you on the next one.